Yoakum Strength Podcast, what is up? We are back with another week of the podcast, and unfortunately, this week Tristan is out, so you're stuck with me again for the intro. But fortunately for you, we had Adam Meakins on the podcast, and this podcast was an absolute banger. I think Adam is my spirit animal, who I want to grow up to become like, and it was he's a sports physio on Instagram. If you don't follow him, you should. If you do follow him, you know what he's about and who he is, and just his approach to calling out bullshit in our field, the not just the like I think there's sometimes this like young coach way of like going about it where they're just calling out everything and like the egotistical way of like everything else is wrong except my way. And Adam really does it in a different way of just poking holes in like well established. And I appreciate it because a lot of times it's like punching up at like these well established ideas that people just take as like facts because somebody like functional patterns or FMS comes out and says they are the thing and they have like a cult like following and everybody's scared to like say anything against them. And he comes out and he says, hey, actually, that's probably not the right way. Actually, we should look at this type of modality. Actually, every client in front of you is an individual client, and we should look into working with that individual client and not just giving them a McGill Big Three, and that's the only solution to the back problems, right? So it was a really, really cool conversation with kind of a badass dude, and he's fucking hilarious. So I hope you guys get a lot out of this podcast. If you want to follow him and you don't already, it's the Sports Physio on Instagram, and hopefully you guys get a lot out of this podcast. Appreciate you guys listening. Keep chopping wood. Let's go. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to tell you about the Yoakum Strength Insider. The Insider is our online training platform that takes everything we talk about on this podcast, better movement, smarter training, and actually enjoying the process, and turns it into something you can live and breathe. Our goal is simple. Create better movers who feel stronger, more capable, and more confident in their bodies. We do that through a holistic approach that includes everything from sprinting and lifting to mobility and spinal movements. Inside the Insider, we run several distinct programs: building better movers for foundational athletic development, a dedicated Olympic lifting program, the Get Yoked series for pushing strength and physique, and washed up movers for lifters who want to keep training hard without beating themselves into the ground. We also offer focused options like a vertical jump program and at-home training, so you're never forced into a one-size-fits-all plan. You're not just getting a program, you're getting full access to our app with video demos, progress tracking, a community Discord, and direct communication with a Yoakum Strength coach, plus our 30-page nutrition and lifestyle guideline covering how we eat, train, and build habits with our athletes. If you want to make training fun again, use code podcast25 at checkout for 25% off your first program. Hope to see you there. Boom. Oh, Coach, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for the invite. Looking forward to talking all things in and around whatever we're going to talk about.
Yeah, keeping it an open conversation. I was kind of giving you a little bit about my background, about the herniated disc when I was 16, going through the McGill method. And I wanted to bring up that background to you just because I think there's like two sides of the spectrum. It's either like you accept everything that is preached from the textbook, everything that is McGilled at you, and you're like a full believer there, or you're kind of this like, fuck the system type person and it's all like rebels and there's like no nuance in the middle ground of people that have actually gone through it, people that are actually research based, people that are actually poking holes in the things that we deem as scientific, the things that we deem as like that is the correct way to do it. And it's almost like you get a negative outlook on people poking holes in something like, let's just use McGill as an example. You get a negative outlook on people like McGill, or people poking holes in McGill because of the rebels in the world that are like actually not doing the research. It's just edgy to go against like the overlords of the physio world, the overlords of the chiro world, that type of thing. And one of the things I really respect about you is when you are poking holes, you're like, hey, here's this study. Hey, here's this like case study that I've done. Here's the thousands of athletes that I've worked with through this process. And it's not just me trolling this person, but it's like, it's actually not beneficial to think this way. And I was really interested in, is this always the way that you kind of thought and always the way that you went down like like your philosophical approach, or was this something that you established, you had like an aha moment of, oh man, maybe the things I'm being taught are not the correct answer?
Yeah, great question. I think like all things, there's a process of learning that goes involved with critical thinking, skeptical thinking, analytical thinking. So no, I'm not going to say I've always been probably as good as I am, and I'm probably hoping that I'm going to be better in time goes forward as well at being, a little bit more balanced, rational, critical, as you say, finding that middle ground, being a bit more nuanced rather than letting my biases and my normal human faults sway me from being able to think clearly and straight around things. But I've always been I've always been a bit of a skeptical bugger. I'll always be somebody that will say, "Okay, thanks for telling me that, but what about this, or could it be that?" So I've never taken things. Well, very rarely have I taken things at face value. Most of the time, I'm always one of these annoying people that sits at the back of the classroom and puts their hand up and says, "But what about this?" or "That doesn't sound quite right," or that sounds a bit too good to be true." And as the saying goes, anything that is too good to be true normally isn't true. So, no, I've always had that sort of mentality, and I've never been a wallflower. I'm always quite happy to stand out and make an annoyance of myself, much to people's other annoyance as well. So it's process that I just think I've got better as I've got older, got more grey hair. I've realized, a lot of the time it's about, as you said, trying to find that nuance and balance and attacking people's arguments rather than them themselves, which is something that unfortunately doesn't happen too often. It's very easy for people to dive on in and start criticizing, and then the old personal insults and accusations come up. And I've had that with, myself, but I've also been accused of doing that to others. And I try to think back, am I doing it? And sometimes I do. I'm a bit, tongue in cheek when I use some words. I call old Squat University A wrong. That technically
That was funny.
isn't the most adult way of discussing and debating his views and opinions on things. So yeah, I am guilty of that myself. But I try to keep my criticisms and critique to the argument rather than to the individual, unless they are complete and utter shysters and charlatans, which there's a few out there. Not many, there are a few out there, and then I will attack the person. But I think most of the information that's out there that isn't true, accurate, or not as true as it could be, or a bit inaccurate, it's often due to ignorance and people being ill-informed rather than them being genuinely malicious and nasty and trying to deliberately deceive people. So I'm always trying to give people the benefit of the doubt. When I see silly bullshit online, I always try to take a step back, take a few deep breaths, and not have that initial knee-jerk reaction.
Well, that's actually something I've written down, and I'm reading "Human All Too Human" by Nietzsche right now, and I literally just read this passage right before we hopped on, but he was talking about how you can't fault man for his wrongs because all wrongs are due to ignorance. But then, man, it's tough. It's tough to like I struggle with that thought process when you have somebody like Squat you have somebody like sometimes Mike Boyle, like where it's like there's no way you don't know better, right? There's no way you
Mm.
haven't been exposed to like different information. So like that's my thought. Like I get like the young strength coaches for sure. Cause again, I was the young dumb strength coach that went through. I was the McGiller to the T, right? Like I was living and dying by that. I was living, dying by like landing mechanics. I was living and dying by like the biomechanical approach to everything and worked my way out of it because people showed me information. But it's like, what about the people that have reached this level where it's like there's just no way. There's no way. I mean, at some point it has to be willful ignorance, like where you're actively looking the wrong way to keep on with your beliefs. Like, what's your thought process around like people like that when I'm sure you see it all the time where it's like you're talking about these people all the time and it's like how are we still saying these things in 2026?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just having some
No, I
technical
saw that.
faults with
Yeah,
my
the light kill,
lighting.
dude. You gotta have that good lighting. Gotta have the good lighting.
with my lighting. Uh, yeah, no, I agree. There's a threshold, I think, here. When you see repeated ignorance, even though you know that damn well others have told them there's other views, there's other information, there's other evidence out there that contradicts or challenges what they're saying, and they just blindly and stubbornly refuse to either accept that or look at it or even take it on board, and they just continue on with the same narratives time and time again, which is exactly what Scott University is guilty of. I could have, absolutely had all the time in the world. I used to follow him. I used to think at the early days, he was putting out information out there that, all right, wasn't the best, but it wasn't the worst either. And occasionally he'd do a post that I could get on board with. But then when I started to see, more people challenge him, I started to question and criticize some of his posts, and I just see him constantly either ignoring it or just doubling down on it. That's when you start to think, okay, there's this person now has got other reasons and alternatives for carrying on this way. And I think most of it is due to sunk cost fallacies. A lot of the time, people go so far with a way of thinking, a method of doing stuff, an approach that they invest so much time, energy, and effort into that. They attach their identity to that that it becomes almost impossible for them to go the other way, to look at another approach, to think they have to start all over again. And so sunk cost fallacies, I think, are the biggest, factor for people like Scott University, who carry on, doing or promoting the same messages, even though I think they probably know that it isn't as clear or simple as they're saying. And that's where I start to get a bit annoyed and pissed off with them. Yeah, and that's where I
That's when
do
they get the
start to
nicknames.
start to attack the man rather than their arguments. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we have a lot of young strength coaches that listen to this podcast. I would say like our main demographics, probably like that 20 to like 30-year old. Obviously at 30, you're probably not considered a young strength coach, but
Oh,
what
you are in my eyes. Trust
yeah,
me.
there you go. There you go. There you go. Perfect. How like what do you think the process of going about the journey of becoming a critical thinker yourself is? Because like you have the like, again like the Boyles McGills where it's just like once you reach my age you'll know and just accept like their message is just accept everything I'm saying to you, but to me like that's a backwards. If we're just accepting everything they're saying, then you're not creating a critical thinker. Like that's not the process. But on the other end of things, you can't just be a 20-year-old that is just throwing shit at the wall and like pretending like you have all the answers. Like, how do you go through the process of learning what's in the box and then being able to be like, okay, well, maybe this box is wrong, or maybe I'm in the wrong box, or maybe this isn't the right box for my athletes or my clientele. And like, what's the right process of that? Because I think a lot of people like there's a lot of bright individuals in the field. There's a lot of people that really want and have bright ideas and different ideas. And then they get so beat down almost by like the system of if you say something that is not completely within the box, you are going to get shamed, you're going to get ridiculed, you're going to get called a grifter. And again, that part of that is right. Like I don't want to fault it by the big heads in the field because there are grifters out there. There are people that are just looking to say something different to like get it. But like ah man, it's like a struggle for a lot of these coaches to want to say their own ideas while also like staying within the box and staying like within their own grounds of okay, this is where I'm at in the field right now, and I do need to learn from other people while also keeping my own ideas without getting brainwashed and just becoming a carbon copy of these people.
Yeah, again, no simple answer here. I think, experience is something that does matter to a certain degree. Absolutely. Like you said, when you're young, dumb, full of cum, you think you know everything. That's a dangerous position to be in. But then so is the other side of the coin. So is the experienced old hand who thinks he knows it all and has stopped thinking and stopped learning and stopped being open to ideas. So, the balance is in the middle. It's always in the middle. It's about finding that approach that when you are starting out and you are young and you recognize that and you are inexperienced, it's thinking, okay, I'm going to take on board what people says. One of my favorite sayings is Bruce Lee's, when he talks about picking up ideas about how to be the best martial artist. He says, learn from as many other people as you possibly can, but accept or take what you think is useful, reject what you think is not useful, and then add what is uniquely your own. And I think that's a great way to go through life with information and learning, absorb information from people, but don't just accept it blindly. It's a red flag when somebody says, this is the way, this is the method, I know everything, this is what you've got to believe in, this is what you've got to do. That's a huge red flag for somebody that's got a fixed mindset, that is dogmatic, that's a bit of a guru, that isn't open to ideas and suggestions, and so probably is going to be making errors and mistakes. So again, it's all about the balance. And I think, experience, and it does take time to get experience, is important to a certain degree. So, the old hands out there, they do know things that are useful. But if they are not open and flexible to accepting new ideas, things that are changing, which, constantly is evolving, we're learning more and more as time goes on, then, experience is worthless. Their experience is absolutely not worth the paper it's written on.
Yeah, I always relate it to it's like the rebel to tyrant like approach in all the worlds. It's like these guys, the way they became the tyrants of the field is they were rebels to start, right? And now they became the tyrant, and now they're shooting down all the
They
rebels. It's
turn
such
into, yeah,
wild. It's
turn
like
into everything they hated themselves. Yeah.
yes, it's such a wild like villain origin story every time. It's crazy. I wanted to know what was the first like do you have a moment in your own career as a young professional in the field where it was like you raised your hand for the first time and it was like you successfully poked a hole in what was being taught. You successfully added of what was uniquely your own. Like, do you remember that case where it was like the first time you're like, wait a minute, like this, I'm not just being a rebel here. This might actually be something. I might actually add something unique to this field, and there might actually be a flaw in this way of thinking.
That's a great question, and I'm trying to desperately rack my brain whether I'm thinking of an episode where that's happened. Because one of the things I find is that, when you do challenge ideas and thoughts and opinions, you often are met with resistance and barriers, normally immediately. Very rarely can I think of a time where I've said something to somebody and I've managed to convince them to change their mind there and then on the spot. So I'm going to say probably no. I don't actually think I've ever can think of a time where that's happened. Now, things happen slowly over time. I get lots of messages from people that said, Adam, I used to think you're a bit of a dick. I used to hate the way you thought. I used to think that you were just digging holes and being contrarian for the sake of it. But now I can see, there is merit to what you're saying. I still don't agree fully with you, but I've actually started to think differently. And that to me is like that makes me feel a little bit warm and fuzzy inside, makes my gentleman area fizz. So when I see that slow process of changing thoughts and opinions occurs, that means that something that I'm doing is on the right track. But I just find very rarely do you get somebody in a room face to face on social media that you can convince there and then within a couple of minutes, half an hour of talking and debating to change their views and minds. That very rarely happens. Most of the time it's a slow process. Change is a slow process. It can occur at glacial paces sometimes. But it's just accepting that and recognizing that. And that's what happens when I get into these debates on social media. I post a lot of stuff on social media not to change people's minds immediately, and particularly those that have got the strongest opinions against what I say. I know those individuals definitely aren't going to be changing their views and opinions. The reason I do it a lot of the time is maybe to plant a seed that just germinates there and matures and grows, over years, if not longer. But it's also for the observer effect as well. It's for those that have a bit more flexible mindsets, that have been perhaps convinced by these other individuals this is the way. Once they start to see that people are questioning it and challenging it and realize there are other alternative hypotheses and opinions out there, I think that's really useful for those with those more flexible mindsets to start to think a bit harder. So I think, challenging misinformation, challenging inaccurate information is essential, because I often get criticized as just being too negative all the time for doing it. And a lot of people saying, you're not achieving anything. All you're doing is pissing people off. And I'm like, yeah, I know that's part of it. But I also think it's the observer effect. I also do think others who are not vocal, who are not saying things out loud, who are not sending messages to other people to say, I've changed my mind, are probably thinking a little bit differently once we start to critique it and challenge it. So I encourage everybody out there, put your opinions out there, and so don't be shy of challenging other people's opinions, because that's how change happens. That's essential. That's needed. The only thing for misinformation to succeed and to grow is for other people not to do anything about it, to them not challenge it. So I'm a big believer of saying, be critical, be skeptical, be vocal about it, put it out there on social media. It is useful. It is important. It does come with some negatives. It does come with some side kick backs, which isn't pleasant sometimes personally, but still keep doing it.
Yeah, the plant the seed thing is something that I written down when I was gonna go talk to you about this too, because my mentor, one of my mentors, Stu Bourne, was one of the best in the world at this. Because again, this was when I was really in my old ways of thinking, and he never once like openly just was like, you're an idiot. He would just like, I would do something with because he was the strength coach for all the other teams that I had, and I had football, right? So like, he was watching me what I did with football, and he would just slide me a piece of paper. So a lot of it was like knees coming in on jumps. I was big into like landing mechanics, let's say. Then he'd be like, well, what about this? Like, what about this elite level athlete? And he would just show me a picture, right? Like, and all it did was plant the seed, and he would water it, and he would water it, and he would just give me like death by a thousand paper cuts until I got to a point in which I realized like I was agreeing with him on a ton of stuff without ever realizing I had totally shifted my mind. But like it was a total 180 in this slow death by a thousand paper cuts way of not just yelling at me for being completely wrong or being a dumbass strength coach. It was, hey, what about this? Hey, what about this different way? Hey, maybe that's not exactly the 100% way to think about it. And I was like, by the time I was done working with him, I was like, oh my God. Like, I didn't even realize he was my mentor at that time until I was able to look back on it like 3 years later. I was like, wow, that was extremely effective.
Yeah, no, it's a great way of trying to, change behavior is to do it gradually and slowly rather than going in like a bull in a china shop, and crashing and banging around and probably creating more problems than you're solving. So I think that more sort of softer, gentler approach when you can do that is absolutely, probably the better way of changing people's behaviors and opinions. But I also do think there's an element of a little bit of shock and awe needed as well occasionally because that sometimes wakes people up from a stupor. It sometimes kicks them out of a rut that they're into and can start the process off as well. So, like anything, it depends on the situation and the individual because social media is an environment where you can't take the slow, gentle, gradual approach often because that's going to get ignored. You're going to get probably 2 likes and 3 views on something that's just a bit too meek and mild. So you do have to go in there with sometimes with a little bit of a shock and awe tactic to grab attention to start that process of saying, okay, maybe there's something else here. But yeah, if you can in a face-to-face environment, a one-to-one environment, then absolutely, it's like you said, a much nicer, gradual way to change behavior without getting as many kickbacks and barriers.
Well, especially in the sports performance field, it's something that kind of blows my mind all the time. It's like the sports performance world will complain about all of these bad ideas on social media, but then never put out counter ideas because their whole thing is like, well, it's just trash. It's social media. It's like you guys do realize like you're losing, you're not winning the game doing that. Like all you're doing is allowing more screen time for those people to pop up on their feeds without like, and you have a bunch of young strength coaches digesting that stuff now rather than the good stuff, right? Like if you actually want to change the game, you have to play the game. And I think a lot of people refuse to play the game because they get so frustrated with some of these snake oilsmen that are playing the game. They're just playing it in the wrong way. But it's like the way to beat them in that game is not just to give up. It's not just like, okay, well, you're just like, and I feel like that's a lot of the approach in the sports performance world.
Yeah, it's say if you turn your cheek or you bury your head into the sand and just call things bullshit, but don't explain why they're bullshit, that isn't going to achieve anything. But there's also that part, I often get this as well. People say, well, give me a solution, give me an alternative. And you say, this doesn't work. What bloody does work? And sometimes I say, well, we don't know. There is no clear answers here. People that have these clear, simple protocols and ideas about things, I'm just saying that isn't the only reason. There are probably, 100 other alternative hypotheses or methods or approaches that you could take that could get the same results as what they're getting without all the bullshit and the complication around it as well. So, I don't have an immediate solution to give you or an alternative to give you. All I'm saying is that's probably not the only thing that's happening and it's not the only way a lot of the time. Or sometimes there is no solution to give. I have this with the old bloody wonky scapular dyskinesis. So I focus a lot in upper limb management with problems. And everybody focuses on this. Oh, you've got a winging shoulder blade, you've got scapular dyskinesis. And it's been proven time and time again that we've got no reliable way for quantifying, classifying, even agreeing whether there is any scapular dyskinesis in the same individuals we're seeing. And it's not predictive of injuries. It doesn't dictate performances. It doesn't create any, significant increased risk of injuries. So I say to people, there is no other solution here other than just to fucking ignore scapulars most of the time. You're saying you need to correct it. You're saying you need to get a more accurate, reliable way to assess it. I'm saying you don't because there is a mountain of evidence out there that says you just need to let scapulars do what scapulars do. And I tell people there's a good reason why you can't see your own fucking shoulder blades. It's because you don't need to see your own fucking shoulder blades. Let them do whatever they fucking want to do. I'm going to put a caveat there because somebody will probably comment and say, "Oh, but there is yes, okay, some very rare situations where the scapula does some weird shit, really obvious weird shit that you can say, okay, that's giving me some useful clinical information." But they're the rarity. They're like one in a 10,000 sort of situations of shoulder pain. So it's a condition that sometimes I find people just want these clear, simple answers. Tell me exactly what the problem is, and then give me this clear answer. And I'm like, well, there isn't one. You've got lots of different options here, and I think that's really liberating and freeing to know. But the human behavior and the human condition is, oh, I don't like that. I don't like having that uncertainty of not knowing which one to do. So tell me which one to do. I'm like, for fuck's sake. It's like you've got options. You can choose out of all the ones that you think fits you based on your situation, your environment, your condition. Your options are almost endless for most problems with the musculoskeletal system. There is no one superior method. And that goes for things like tendons. I see this all the time as well. Everybody complaining about, oh, you've got to do isometric contractions. They're great for tendons. I'm like, no, they're not. They work just as well as anything else. They are one option to consider. If you've got a grumpy tendon that's pissed off and giving you some issue, try an isometric. But I can guarantee it ain't going to work for fucking everybody you use it on. So it's about having options. That's what I think is really useful to know. And that's one of the biggest messages I try to get out there. There is no one superior method approach to anything. Back pain, knee pain, tendon pain, shoulder pain, you name it, you've got options.
But it also feels like not only does the human mind nowadays look for an answer to the problem, but we look for the problem. And a lot of times, like, that problem doesn't seem to exist. Like with a lot of athletes that are coming into the gym, it's like this age of neuroticism that the sports scientists have kind of created in our field of like these athletes that are perfectly functioning athletes. They're just not at the level that they want to be at yet. And it's just they need to spend more time in their sports. They need to spend more time working out. Like they're just not there yet, right? But now it's like I have a reason for why I'm not there yet, other than I'm just not good enough yet. And it's like it's such a bad and rather than just like being the person that can sit that athlete down and being like, that's not the case, man. Like you're perfectly fine. Like you're a perfectly functioning athlete. Maybe we have some pain here and we can work on it. We can get you right. But like it's just a time thing. It's just a skill thing. We will work on this. We will get better. And we can give them a truthful answer. It's like so many people are willing to sell these athletes neuroticism, willing to sell these athletes a problem that is non-existent. And I just really do not think many, like, I don't think all of these coaches or PTs or physios are ill-intended. I think they like actually want to help. Like they act, but they don't understand the negative power of their words, right? Like they're all talking about like preventing an ankle sprain without realizing they are spraining that athlete's brain, which is going to cost them. I have seen so many athletes, it takes so much longer just to get them out of their own head than it is to like actually fix anything physiologically wrong with them. And when you get them out of their own head, you're like, oh my God, that is a totally different person right now. That's a totally different athlete. But like, I'm interested in your perspective. It's like, what is this wave of neuroticism? Where is this from? Is it just because like the capitalistic approach of it's super easy to sell a problem? Like what is that? Why are we pushing that so hard on these athletes?
That's a great question again. And again, I don't think I've got a clear, simple answer because it's probably multifactorial. I'm just going to say I love that saying, spraining a brain. I think that's a blinding way of trying to highlight how people can sometimes get hung up over their own bloody ideas. Sometimes you got a sprained brain. But yeah, no, I agree. I see all of these sort of things happening, not only in professional sports, but in the general population as well. The over analysis, over diagnosis of various different problems and issues, causes, I think, a lot of people to have unnecessary fears and they overcomplicate things that they just don't really need to. We talked about the scapula being a perfect one. In the company that I think, has done a lot of this, particularly in sports, is that functional movement screens, FMS. These guys have been going for decades now, and they have been screening hundreds of athletes, normally from quite a young age, impressionable people, motivated, keen, and they've been screening them and saying, right, you're not doing this as good as you could do. You've got a deficit here in this range of movement. You're not able to hold yourself in perfect symmetry in this position. And so you've got to address this and fix this first before you can be good at doing what you're doing, or you're going to have a greater risk of problems and injuries. And I think that is a very shitty narrative to give people that are desperately trying to be the best they can be at a sport or an activity that they love and enjoy. So yeah, I've got a lot of personal grudges against FMS. I trained in FMS many years ago. I've used it on athletes because I was told I had to by the higher authorities, and they are probably one of the biggest culprits of this neuroticism about, oh my God, you can't, do your bird dog perfectly symmetrically, therefore your back is going to explode as soon as you go onto the pitch. Or, you can't reach up behind your back as far as you can do. Your baseball pitching now is going to be negatively affected. I'm like, it's just absolute bullshit. But, why it happens, I do think, people like to try to make complex, uncertain things less complicated and more certain. Humans hate uncertainty. We like to have, this clear, simple reason and approach to things because it makes us feel more comfortable. And I think, that's why it is so attractive to a lot of people. And a lot of people just need to get, I think, a bit more comfortable being uncomfortable and being uncertain about stuff. And that includes, not just athletes themselves, but also the therapists and the coaches that are looking after them as well. And it's about managing that uncertainty, but in a positive way by saying to people, all these things, they're complex, they interplay with each other. We may not know which one is which, but that doesn't mean you can't do what you need to do. That doesn't mean it's going to negatively affect you because the system, you as a human being are adaptable, you're resilient. Things can come at you from different angles and different approaches rather than just being perfectly symmetrical all the time. And your body will adapt to it and your body will cope with it. Your body will absorb these things. It doesn't mean you're going to be damaged and injured.
Dude, I actually have to thank FMS for something because it was my first experience to the bullshit of the strength conditioning world. I think it was my sophomore year of college. They brought in our coaches brought in like an FMS screening like group, so they screened the whole team. Every single one of the starters or like good athletes on the team. So the first or second stringers were put in the bad movement category, the bad movers category, and every single one of the like it was almost like 100% hit rate. Every single one of the bad athletes on the team, the third and fourth string athletes on the team, were put in the good. And I was like looking at this and I was like, what are we doing? Like it was such a wild, like it was my first exposure to it. I was like, I really had to sit down and question. I was like, how? How is our Division 1 running back that is probably going to get drafted? How is he in the bad category? And then you have a dude over here that will never want, like, great dude, but will never once play a snap on Saturdays, put in the good category. And I was like, what are we doing here, man? Like, this is crazy. And like, all the coaches were so for it because it gave them graphs, it gave them numbers, it gave them like really, like you were saying, clear cut data to we can improve our team based off of this. But it was like, how are we not looking at that and being like, this is ass backwards? All of our good athletes are in the bad category, and all of our bad athletes are in the good category.
Yeah, exactly right, mate. That's a big, again, another red flag that highlights how, these things aren't as clear cut as they like to market them or tell them or say they are. So it's about just being able to challenge that and criticize it often as regularly as you can. But I can't believe that FMS is still so popular. It really does blow my mind, even though, there is now a lot like yourself, coaches out there that know that it doesn't add much, to screening or injury risk or performance. It's just mind boggling that it's still so popular and out there.
So one of the things you were talking about is like the body will adapt to the stressors or the asymmetries that is put on it. How do you work with your athletes and the people that you work with, your clients, on getting them to kind of accept that fact and like have I kind of look at it as like faith in their bodies and like what they're capable of doing. Like how do you get them to slowly and gradually accept the fact that their bodies are capable of doing these things? And that does not mean you won't get injured. That does not mean you won't experience pain. And that does not mean we cannot improve certain things, right? Like two things can be true at once, but how do you go through that process of like getting somebody, I don't want to say confident in their bodies again, but like have faith in their bodies again and their abilities?
Yeah, again, great question. No simple answer. I think, the main two things you want to try and do with people is to, educate them as best as you can do, give them the information, give them the alternative views and opinions in a clear, sensible, rational way that again doesn't confuse them or cause them too much cognitive dissonance or kickback too much. So again, a lot of it comes down to talking, discussing things through, explaining how, in nature, there's very little things that are perfectly symmetrical and they can cope very well, and how asymmetry sometimes can be beneficial, can be an advantage to be asymmetrical, certainly in things like throwing sports and stuff like that. And then I think the biggest thing is just by, time as well, is getting people to experience doing things that they thought was going to be bad or dangerous or harmful or negative, and they actually, through experiential learning, find out that it wasn't as bad or as harmful or as negative as they thought it would be. And I think that just takes time, and that's, repeatedly just convincing people to keep on going, keep doing the thing, and you'll get better at doing the thing. Don't worry too much about it. Don't focus too much on perfection. Variation's okay, but just keep doing the thing. Keep doing the thing. If it looks a little bit different one day to the next day, doesn't matter. Keep doing the thing. Keep doing the thing. And I think that exposure eventually makes people realize, okay, all right, perhaps these things aren't as bigger issues as I thought they were.
And on the opposite end of that, like when do you realize like a red flag is actually a red flag? Like there's
Okay.
actually something we got to improve on this end, and we can go fix this thing that is an actual issue.
Great question. And I think, it all comes down to how it feels. So I think, there is a point where, pain has to be, a guiding factor. If you keep doing the thing and it just keeps hurting you consistently, repeatedly, then I think there needs to be, within reason, to, within time frames, there needs to be, something here that says, okay, well, maybe we do need to change. Maybe we do need to alter, adapt to try and make that painful thing less painful. So I think, it's more not so much about how something looks. It's not the observed clues that give us the idea. It's about the feeling. It's about how a movement feels, how a task feels that I am much more keen to listen to decide whether I think it needs to be adapted or altered. Or even sometimes it just needs a break as well, because that's the other thing. It just sometimes can be due to a volume and an intensity problem rather than an actual asymmetry performance problem and issue as well. So if load and volume and everything else is all managed well and it's still causing somebody some problems, then I'll think, okay, then let's look at adaptation. Let's look at changing things around based on how it's feeling. So it's not so much how it looks, it's more about how it feels.
Well, and I really like that thought process. And you've talked about like the magic coaching eye too. And I think that's something that's pushed in the field. It's like there's these magic coaches that see something that nobody else sees. And like I see it all the time with these like really high level strength coaches training these 12-year-olds. And dude, they'll be like doing this 12-year-old's doing a skip. It's probably their 10th time doing a skip in their entire life. And they're watching like specific minute movements of their foot, like pretending like they see something. And like, what are we doing, dude? This is like a 12-year-old like skipping. Like, what are we doing? But like, how do you also balance that? I'm thinking about this in the like maybe straw manning my own argument, but like, how do you balance that thought process of there is no magic eye while also trusting what you're seeing as a coach? Like the balance of okay, my shit can still stink and I can still see things that are wrong or do need to be fixed, and the balance there because it seems so pushed. Like once these coaches reach a certain level, it's just like they believe their own BS when they
Yeah.
when they're talking about some of this stuff.
Yeah, again, a great question. And, it's one of my pet hates as well is seeing people micromanage somebody doing an exercise or a performance task. And it just drives me crazy with all those cues that they end up giving them to try and make it look better. And all it does is confuses the hell out of the person and they end up doing it worse. But when would I sort of step in and say, okay, that doesn't look good. Let's think about doing something different. It's very hard to say, but I'm probably going to use what I call my vomit test. If a person is moving and it's making me feel physically sick, I'm having a sort of visceral reaction to looking at them squatting or deadlifting, and I'm like dry heaving and feeling like I'm going to lose my lunch because it looks so fucking ugly, then I'm probably going to say, right, let's just hold up here a little bit. Let's think about deloading it a little bit. Let's reduce the intensity and see if you move a little bit less fucking ugly. Let's try that. So I think it's hard to quantify. It's hard to say. I think it's a bit like pornography. What is the official definition of pornography? A big legal case that was out there, and the conclusion was, well, we don't actually know, but we know when we see it. So I think it's same with performance and exercise. What is ugly pornographic exercise? Well, I think we know it when we see it, but it's hard to actually define and quantify.
Well, and even on there, like the solution of maybe we just back off. We do the same thing and we just back off, right? Like maybe we just slow things down instead of giving 1,000 magic cues or writing off the. I mean, the worst thing is we write off the movement in general. We write off squats. We
Yeah.
write off deadlifts. It's like that. How did we get to that solution for the simple problem of probably a load management issue or an intensity issue or a volume issue for that athlete? And now instead of saying, Yeah, we loaded up that athlete way too much, way too fast for their abilities currently, and we want to get them eventually to the ability to be able to handle those loads and do those things in a non-vomit, pornographic way. We settled on the solution of that movement is terrible. That movement is always going to get an athlete hurt. Like it just goes from n of zero to like n of like it's 0 to 1 reasoning.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think, there needs to be those considerations taken into consideration as well. It's about, has the individual had enough time and exposure to work out various different strategies to complete this movement and task? Have they had the experience and the number of reps needed for their system to sort of self-organize itself? I'm a big believer of the human being being able to self-organize given enough opportunity and making sure that it's got sufficient capacity to complete the task. You'll often find a human will self-organize to complete that task. So I am a big believer of just making sure that we have got all the things that are required for that person to be able to self-organize. Have they got the strength? Have they got the range of movement? Have they got the confidence? Have they got the exposure? Have they got the number of years of experience under their belt? All these things need to be taken into consideration before you start jumping in and saying this is not good, this needs to be changed. So let people, and I think, let people make mistakes, because that is a great learning factor as well when it comes to learning exercises. If somebody is skipping for the 12th time, that's not going to be enough reps under the belt for them to be able to work out a good movement strategy. Let them make some mistakes. Let them fucking feel awkward and uncomfortable occasionally, because that is a great teacher. Fucking up and failing and even getting some pain sometimes is a great educator to say, don't fucking do that again. Do something different next time. So I think we need to let people learn through mistakes, through experience. And, if you're in sports and you're into training and you can do it regularly, we have to get people to accept that injuries are part of it. It's inevitable, and it's not something that can be avoided. This bulletproofing system that everybody talks about as well, and all these things that we sometimes say about prevention of injury. I'm like, yeah, I know what you're kind of saying, but you can't prevent injuries. They're going to happen. I think it's about preparation for injury. It's about understanding that they're going to happen. Sometimes you'll do something that hurts for no rhyme or reason, got no clue why it's happened. That's just part of life. That's just part of the game. And getting athletes and the general population understanding that and aware of that, I think is a fundamental part of a coach and a therapist's job.
Well, and that leads me into one of my favorite things that you've said. It's like you're gonna get hurt if you do, and you can get hurt if you don't as well. And that's
You'll
something that's
definitely
like,
get hurt if you don't. I
dude,
think
that's
that'll
what
be
I
even
mean.
more
Like
so. Yeah.
it's such a wild process of like we demonize squats, we demonize deadlifts, we demonize running. Like everything, if some coach has demonized some part of training, if we listen to all that, so their solution is we sit on a couch. You know what happens if you sit on a couch? You become obese. You know what happens if you're obese? You get a shitload of diseases and a lot of things wrong with your body, right? Like, and especially in like the American culture where like our problem is not people moving too much and getting too hurt from moving too much. That is not our problem. Like the number one cause of health insurance money being spent on our like system is people that don't move, right? So like you have all these people saying one thing, it's like you guys are totally missing the forest for the trees of okay, if you demonize all this, you tell people how dangerous the gym is, how dangerous movement is, and now it's to the point how dangerous just running is. It's not even weights anymore. It's running, it's sprinting, it's everything. It's like what do you think that turns out to look like? Like now people just sit on the couch all day and don't move because that's the best way not to get hurt. It's like, okay, they're still going to get hurt doing other things in their life that they're required to do. And if they actually never leave the couch, they're going to be one of those. I can't remember what the show was, where it's like 500 plus club, where it's just like those people that actually never leave the couch, like they're like sunk into their couch, like 500 pounds. Like, how do we think that is the better solution to this rather than being nuanced about it?
Yeah, say it's backward, isn't it? The fact that, health promotion is all about scaring the shit out of people of doing the things that's going to make them healthy. It just doesn't make any bloody sense. It is counterintuitive, it's counterproductive, and it does need to change. So yeah, I think we need to be getting messages out there that, gym-based training, strength-based training is one of the safest bloody things you can do in your life. The thousands of hours of exposure and the rates of injuries that we see are tiny. compared to, other things. So again, I think it's that promotion of these facts and figures that we got data on, and using that positively rather than negatively by scaring people. And it's actually encouraging them to do the opposite. It's scare them of sitting on the fucking couch. That's where the scare needs to be laid. That's where the fear needs to be promoted, not about doing deadlifts with a slightly lordotic back or kyphotic pelvic tilt or whatever. It's about, sitting down on your ass and punching in the Cheetos. That's where the problem lies, not not the deadlifts.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about some of the spine stuff too, and I think that is I think it's a bias of mine to like have an eye towards just because I went through that whole process of doing things. But the spine is one of the most demonized and commoditized things in the sports performance field, in the health field of you will get hurt, your back will. And I think a big part of it is like, okay, you mess up your shoulder, you mess up your knee, it does affect your life. It sucks a little bit, but you usually can do other things in your life, right? If you tweak your back, dude, you might be laying in bed for 2 days, right? Like, and no, like it's such a fear-based thing of if I'm laying in bed for 2 days and then I get sold all this stuff, it's crazy. I had a coach that I worked with, man. He tweaked his back, coaching. He had like previous spine injuries, tweaked his back coaching. He went into the doctor because he like couldn't move. He was locked up. And that day, they had him scheduled for a surgery the very next day. And I was like, hey man, like maybe like, and he came to me, he's like, yeah, they wanted to do like another surgery and they have it scheduled for tomorrow. I was like, what are we talking? Like, how about we wait a week? Like, this was 2 days post. I was like, what in the world are we doing with this stuff, man? It's like you're gonna cut him open because he's had 2 days of a back that is locked up, and he has a history of back injuries and has had a ton of back surgeries, which is probably a decent reason for a lot of these like current issues he's having. Like, what are we talking about? But like, why is that such a why is that so pushed in our field? Like what is that? Why is it so specific? Is that what it is? It's just the money thing with the back?
Massive, massive financial incentives, huge financial incentives for invasive interventions, for things that scare the shit out of people, like back pain does. Because it is a condition, as you say, that does really severely impact on normal activities. So it scares people, it puts them off, it thinks something drastic has happened. Seriously painful problems make people think there's something seriously problematically wrong. But we know that that's a poor association. Severity of pain is a poor correlation with tissue damage or anything, serious in the actual uh, body itself. But, because people don't understand that, it is easy to sell the invasive interventions. And there's a lot of financial incentives to do that, a huge amount of financial incentives to do that. Telling people to go home and sit it out and be patient, take a few, over the counter medications, use a little hot pack every now and again, try a little bit of floor based exercises. There's no money to be made in that. There's no, there's no, also no real skill in that as well. And that's the other thing. It's, healthcare's inadequacy issues that it has with these things. It feels like because it can't offer a dramatic solution immediately, it doesn't like to feel inadequate. So it comes up with all these grandiose approaches to treating and helping things that are just often totally unnecessary and needed because people don't have the confidence to tell people just to give it time and do the simple stuff because it makes them feel inferior or not as skilled. I actually see it the other way around now. I think the true sign of a skilled coach and a therapist or a doctor or a surgeon are those that don't rush in and start suggesting things. Those are the ones that have got the skill. Those are the ones that have got the confidence and the emotional intelligence to be able to override those driving human biases that says overcomplicate it, do something now. I think the best advice I give most of my younger therapists and physios and coaches is often, it's about standing there and not rushing in and doing anything. It's the opposite of what everybody says. Don't just stand there, do something. I say, no, 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 no. Stand there and don't do anything. It's the exact fucking opposite. That's where the real skill comes. Watchful waiting, watchful observing. These are the things that are so important in what we do, particularly with pain and problems. It's not having that knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah, it's almost like a scarcity mindset, except that scarcity mindset can literally cost somebody their livelihood and their ability to move in the way. And it's just so just feels so dirty sometimes. When he was telling me they had the surgery scheduled the very next day, I was like, man, dude, those are not the people, regardless of if you need that surgery or not, those are not the people you should be going to.
No. And I sometimes say to them, look, if you went to the doctor with a headache, would you be happy if he turned around and said, we're going to need to cut your brain open and do some brain surgery? It's the same thing, you need to understand that sometimes pain comes and goes without any reason. If you've got no clear, obvious red flags of anything serious or sinister, don't start intervening with aggressive, invasive interventions. Just give things time. And everybody underestimates the time. That's the other thing I think drives this. People just lack patience nowadays. And I think everybody wants a solution yesterday. They're not prepared to wait 6 weeks for an episode of bad back pain to feel fully resolved. They're not prepared to wait 3 months for a grumpy tendon to start to settle down. They're not prepared to give it that amount of time. And so they go and start doing things that they think are going to speed it up, which is not the exact opposite. It often slows it down and delays progress, but they think or it's sold as a speeding up solution. And so I think that drives a lot of it as well.
Yeah, it's just like it just made me think when you were saying that. It's like if this was a money thing where somebody came to you and was like, "Hey, I can make you $1 million tomorrow. You just got to give me all of this right now." It's like you would look at that and be like, No, like you're a snake. Like this is a pyramid scheme. There's something going on here that's a little goofy. Like your alarms would be on. But again, you're in such a fear-based spot, like with the health, that it's like yes, like I'm saying yes to that opportunity. It's like you would never say yes to that opportunity if it was a money thing. Like you'd be way more cautious over that, and you'd be like, let me think about it. But when it comes to your health, it's like, yeah, I'm going to give you that $1 million. You're going to make me a
Yeah.
millionaire tomorrow.
I know people the same with their cars as well. They don't go and rush in and start
Yeah,
paying
that's a good one.
mechanics, with hundreds and thousands of pounds to change and fix their cars and everything. They're ones that are, well, hold on a minute. Let me go and get a second opinion. Let me take it down to the garage down the road. Let me go and see if somebody else can say something different. But no, no, not when it comes to my body. Fuck it. No, I'll take the first person's advice and they can cut me open and start playing around with my insides. Yeah.
The car analogy. That's a good one. I'm stealing that one for sure because that's I do that with my car all the time. I'll take it 6 different places to get the cheapest price and
Absolutely.
make sure everything's right.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. With the spine, one thing, and this isn't. I don't want you to try to make it into a bulletproofing thing, but has been pushed that basically the solution to the spine is just to never train it, never move it. And basically, it's like a helicopter parent around the spine, which inevitably, to me, in my philosophy, causes more injuries because you're going to be required to move it. You're going to be required to bend it. You're going to be required to do these things. What is your approach when you're working with somebody that maybe has a history of spine issues, or just wants to feel better? Like, how do you go about training them? Like, what are your core philosophies to work with that athlete to get them to a spine that's not bulletproof, that a spine that is functioning and at least has a higher probability of handling the stressors that life are going to put on it?
Yeah, again, no simple answer there because it depends. One of my favorite responses to questions nowadays, it depends on the individual, it depends on their back pain, it depends on the severity, it depends on the chronicity, it depends on so many variables as the approach I would take. But avoidance of things is very rarely the solution, very rarely. I'm not going to say never because sometimes it is. Sometimes, you do get people that get into these, what I call pain endurance coping strategies that aren't helpful. They sometimes do just carry on pushing into pain, irritating things. And sometimes for those people, a period of avoidance, of stopping doing the thing, actually is pretty reasonable and sensible and does help. But that doesn't mean it has to be a permanent stop. That doesn't mean you have to never go back to doing it. It just means taking a temporary break, letting shit calm down, and then gradually building it back up. But my approach to most people with back problems is graded exposure. The thing that is causing the problem is the solution to the problem as well. You just got to find the right dosage, frequencies, volumes, intensities of the thing that you can tolerate at the moment. Keep exposing yourself at a level that is tolerable, and the system will slowly adapt, and your capacity to that will increase, and then your tolerance will increase as well. So if you just find the thing that is the problem, that normally is where the solution lies. It's about the dosage of it. That's the key factor. So, if bending over is the problem, bending over is the solution. If leaning backwards is the problem, leaning backwards is the solution. If turning a 45-degree angle while you're sticking your finger up your bum is the problem, then that will be also the solution to, maybe not without the finger, maybe. But anyway, it's you get my point. It's whatever the task, the activity is that's provoking the symptoms. It's normally about that thing has lost tolerance to it. The only way it's going to develop tolerance to it is by exposure to it. We just got to try and reduce it first to build it back up.
Well, and especially working with a bunch of athletes, a thing that I think like a lot of PTs, chiros, even strength coaches can miss is like their goal isn't to be pain-free and not moving. Their goal is to be pain-free while they are at this high level of performance, right? Or not pain-free, but like functioning at this high level of performance. And their like solution is just cut out all these things and you will feel better. It's like, is that their goal or is that your thing that you're putting on them? You know what I mean? Like their goal is to get back to sprinting if they have a hamstring issue, right? Like their goal, if somebody pulls their hamstring and your only solution is just never sprint again, it's like, well, that doesn't work. But we say that stuff all the time about things with the spine or even the shoulders. You see it all the time with the shoulders too. It's just like never go overhead again, never squat again, never deadlift again. It's like that's not their goal. Like you're not actually solving that problem. You're creating a different solution to a problem that is not the thing that they want.
Yeah, as I said, avoidance is very rarely the solution to things, and certainly not a permanent avoidance because that isn't going to help them at all. And as you say, it's not person centered. It's not aligned with the individual's goals and aspirations, and that's what drives a lot of my decision making. Is asking the person about what is it you want to achieve that you can't do at the moment, and then it's about working out a plan of how to get them there. And that very rarely involves, well, we're never going to do it because how the bloody hell are they going to get to doing what they want to do by never bloody doing it? So, it's driven by the individual's goals 99% of the time. You just got to work out the best path, the best route to get there.
Well, and when you're working with a high level athlete, like what is the process of understanding that their high level of performance is going to come at a cost to the body? Maybe it comes at a cost of pain while still managing you're working with their goals while trying to like it's not a pain like we're not bringing pain to zero, but we're trying to mitigate pain. You're trying to reduce pain so that they're able to perform. Like, what's your process? Because it's so different when you're working with a really high level athlete, where it's like there's probably going to be issues, and you have to be like open and honest with them that there's going to be issues, and there's probably still going to be things. But our goal is to reduce those issues or mitigate those issues so that you can perform at the highest levels, rather than the like again the snake oil cell of you're going to be completely functioning. Like I don't know a professional athlete that I've ever worked with or ever talked to that talks about how amazing their body feels all the time. Like that's just not a case because especially like American football, you can feel amazing, you can do all the right programming. If you get hit by an NFL linebacker, your body is not going to be pain free. I'm telling you, and your sport requires to do that. So, what's your process when you're working with like a high level person like that, where pain is a part of the sport, pain is a part of the cost of the thing that they want to accomplish?
Well, I think, as you've said there, most high level athletes know that pain is a part of the job. It's something they're going to have to sort of start to accept. And I think that's the process that's most important is getting into that acceptance and commitment, that understanding that it is something that you're going to have to endure if you want to achieve what you want to achieve, which is to play at a high level. You are going to have to train hard, you're going to have to play hard, and that is going to create some physical toll, and that is going to, make you feel, different than if you were training at a lower intensity without all the higher uh, volumes and frequencies that you're doing. So it's just about starting that acceptance process and deciding whether that person's prepared to do that, and whether they think this is a lifestyle is right for them. Because, sometimes they might say, well, no, I think the downsides are too big compared to the upsides. And so some people just don't carry on. That's why I think some, potential athletes don't do as well as they probably could do, because they've come to that decision now that these negatives, which they are coping or trying to deal with, are just too hard. And therefore they're gonna, start to back off. And that backing off then means their performance starts to get negatively affected. Whereas those that have got a bit of mindset where they say, okay, it's not pleasant, I don't enjoy it, but I'm accepting it. I understand this is a downside of what I have to endure to try to achieve what I genuinely really want to achieve. So I think it's all about, that balance between risk, reward, achievement, and negative feelings.
Yeah, and just having an honest conversation with them about that too. So like if it is a thing where they're like, yeah, this isn't worth it, then you they have that honest conversation and save them 5 years of like trying to find the magic cure for the thing that they're not going to find.
Absolutely. I think, just accepting your place in the world and saying, all right, I ain't going to be the next Michael Jordan, or I ain't going to be, the top level performer in my sport or field that I thought I was going to be. But I'm happy with that. I've accepted that. I think that's a great position for people to be in. This constant drive of always trying to push people to do things that they just generally don't want to do. I don't think is healthy. It's not good for your body or your mind. So, sometimes people just need to wake up and face that realization sometimes as well.
And on the other end of it, just a little bit where it's like, what happens if you're working with, let's say, like a mule, like is somebody that like constantly is just like, oh, they are actually overtraining, they're actually overreaching. And it's like, you would be so much better off if we just like took one step back. Do you work with athletes like that where it's like an education process on that side of things?
Yeah, I had one last week actually. I had what's called a journeyman. So he's a boxer and he's a journeyman and he goes around the country, getting paid to be the guy that loses fights. Basically, he's somebody that helps other potential boxers to be coming up and going. And he's just got this mindset that he has to go around various different boxing rings in the country and get his face punched in to earn his living and earn his money, and that's his life. And I'm like, and he keeps coming to me and saying, "Oh, this hurts now. This is the problem. This is the problem." I'm like, I'm not fucking surprised. What you're doing isn't really the best thing for your body and your health at the moment. But he's just got that attitude. That's what he wants to do, and he's just going to carry on doing it. And I can't do anything about that. I have to work with that rather than try to change that. And so, you just try to do the best you can in a bad situation, which often isn't a lot, apart from just, perhaps strapping them up and, giving them a little bit there of a friendly ear to listen to while they're ranting and raving and feeling a bit down in the dumps about it, which, sometimes I think is the best therapy for people when they've got all these real problems and they've got this attitude or this approach, is just being there for them to listen to and support them and just say, right, okay, let's go.
Well, pulling ourselves out of the philosophical, we can end on a little bit of a like real life. I like kind of like giving the people the like the 10-year approach of the philosophical stuff. But I also love to hear like people like yourself, like what's your day to day look like when that athlete comes in? Like what are you doing with that athlete? Is it exercises to make them feel better? Is it like what's your actual day to day when that athlete walks in the door? Like what are you doing with them? What's the education process? Like how's it actually look?
It depends again. So, that last guy, the journeyman, it was pretty much just a session of talking. I didn't do anything. And then other athletes, it's completely different. And that's the same with the general population, So, some sessions, it's all pretty much movement based, activity based, exploring different ways of doing things, trying out different methods. Other times it's just sitting down and listening and talking about things and coming up with a strategy and a plan without actually stepping inside the gymnasium at all. So it really does depend from person to person. And again, it's all driven by the individual goals. The first question I ask a lot of people is, how can I help you today? What is it you want? And then take it from there.
And when you're developing a plan for them, is that like an exercise plan? Is it like isometrics and like some movements that we're doing? Like how intensive is that? I know it depends on the person. I'm trying to like, I know it's like
Exactly. It
trying to base off
depends
like what
again.
they have.
So some people, yeah, I'm sitting down, well, not with them, but normally, in the after hours after they've gone, sitting there for half an hour, 45 minutes, going through and working out a very methodical, structured program of rehabilitation exercises, focusing on the progression of either the volume and the sets and the reps and the intensities, all very intricately put onto an Excel spreadsheet that I'll give them to follow. And then other times it's very much, right, I just want you to do this one thing as many times as you possibly can, and I'll see you next week. So again, highly variable. And I think that's the key thing. We got to recognize humans are variable, they're individual. And if you've got the one standard approach to everybody you see, it ain't going to work well for most people.
Absolutely. Last question of the podcast. I'm interested in somebody that has seen the field go through a lot of waves. What is something that is in 2026 coming back up, or maybe it's new that you're like, God damn it, guys! Like, what are we doing with this thing? That maybe it's a new thing that is popping up, and you're like it's the new functional patterns type training method, or maybe it's something that's being revived. You're like, how are we still back to this? But is there anything you're seeing through your like watching the waves of the field that has came back up in 2026 that we need to kick in the butt in February before it's 2027?
Well, functional training, I think, is one that's got very, very popular massively again recently after it started off back in the 90s, as a new novel way of doing things. So yeah, that is definitely something that is getting popular. And whether this has been around before, I'm not sure. But the other thing that really drives me crazy that's got really popular at the moment is fascia training, fascial training.
Oh yeah, that's big now again.
Oh man, the belief that you can, individually and specifically train your fascia with certain specific types of exercises, it's just moronic. It is mind-blowingly stupid to be able to actually think that way, that you can train your fascia independently of other tissues and that it needs specific types of movements to train the fascia better. Fascia is pretty much an inert tissue. It just comes along for the ride with what you're doing. It's the containing around your muscles. It connects things to other things, granted, but the force transmissions through fascia are negligible. And everybody's talking about, you got to pull on this to move this, wiggle your little toe, and you're going to get your latissimus dorsi and the ipsilateral side to be working better. And it's just absolutely mind-bogglingly fucking stupid. So yeah, this fascial training thing is something that's very annoying to me. That's been very popular over the last sort of 6 or 12 months recently. I've been seeing.
So slings are not in.
No, no, anatomy slings, yeah, or anatomy trains and everything. It's just this. It just takes. It's plausible, but it takes the real realms of plausibility just way too far. Yes, individual body parts do have effects on other body parts, absolutely. But to say that your left TMJ joint is what's causing your right fucking knee pain, I'm like, get the fuck out of it. There is absolutely no way that there is any plausible way that a TMJ joint is going to be a significant impactor on your knee problems. So again, when people come up with these terms and explanations, I just want to tear my bloody face off. It's just mind-bogglingly stupid. Again, just this over complexity.
Well, it keeps you in business for a little bit longer there.
It does, yeah. Give me a chance to rant and rave as well. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do this. This was dope. This is awesome.
No worries, Austin. Good talking, buddy. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you guys for listening. Keep chopping wood.